Today, and it's nice to get away and just be able to relax for a while. Thank you. I'm going to talk a bit today about my pal, Angus Clyne, and a few issues that we now in manufacturing are dealing with. So, thank you. Angus Clyne Australia is a family-owned South Australian-based company which designs, manufactures, wholesales and retails corporate clothing. The family also have another company, cutting-edge clothing manufacturers, a very little known company, which is the manufacturing arm of our own label, Angus Clyne, but also manufacturers for many other people. It was in September of 1987 that my husband Robert, today, set off, work out how many years ago, on the bicentennial camel trek, which he led for 4 months from Darwin to Adelaide. It was an enormous feat. But when he returned home, he had another challenge on his hands. Because remembering in those days, there were no mobile phones. In fact, I think we were in communication about once every 10 days. And I saw him once during that 4 months with the children in Alice Springs. So I told him I had decided to do my thing and start a clothing company, corporate clothing company. With an accountant friend, I had the structure and legal side all worked out. I had the premises organised, the cutter, the sewers ready, and the enthusiasm to make and sell new upmarket corporate clothing to the world. That was my idea. The company was formed and except for one hiccup we had with the bank, because in those days I had to have my husband sign forms as a guarantor for me. So I had my first, what I call, bad bank experience. I opened for business in Melbourne Street in January, in North Adelaide, Melbourne Street, North Adelaide, in January 1988. I thought that I'd share a little of my background prior to entering the rag trade, because it was that period prior to 1988 that created the foundation and enhanced my determination, knowledge and resilience through various experiences to enjoy and endure 25 years in the rag trade. University student, technical writer, tea lady, file clerk, library officer, police officer, assistant police prosecutor, housewife, image consultant, psychology lecturer, wife and mother were all part of the journey prior to Angus Clyne. Until the age of 16, I believed that physiotherapy was to be my career. A school visit to the Royal Adelaide Hospital in my final year, destined to go there, changed my mind. That's the speech in itself. But I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but I actually realised you had to touch the way I didn't want to touch people. That sounds terrible, but it was a reality check, because I actually fainted in front of one of the patients and got up and said, "You don't have to touch them, do you?" So I began in 1973 a Flinders degree in psychology. My aim, a double major in psychology, clinical psychology was my chosen profession. My love of people and fascination with behaviour was my reasoning and driving force. The projected career to be a clinical psychologist, however, had a few interruptions, which meant that I didn't graduate for 5 years until 1978. Nor did I, in fact, ever become a psychologist. Robert and I married in second year at university, mainly supported by our parents who didn't live in Adelaide. I worked for periods when necessary, a library officer at the State Library and the Architecture Library at the Institute of Technology in those days. And for a short period of time, we used to go to Sydney to stay with my parents through holidays. So I worked as a technical writer at the Randwick Naval Base, coding things onto the NATO system, which was quite interesting. I graduated with a double major in psychology as planned, but instead of becoming a psychologist, I decided to follow my husband, who, to the astonishment of his university's lecturers and friends, had joined the police force, South Australian Police Force, after his honours year. So, to the further amazement of my lecturers and our friends, and particularly our family, my mother didn't talk to me about it for 20 years, I joined too. No, not in some specialist area, but as a uniformed police officer. And down to Fort Lance I went in 1978. I was the first married woman and the first female university graduate to join in an operational capacity. I had suspended my postgraduate work as I thought the police force, for some reason, would be my vehicle for gaining the experiences I needed when and if I went back to psychology. Well, if the experience of a life is what I wanted, then life at every level is what I got. I became a recognised marksman or markswoman and qualified on the racetrack of the International Raceway as a pursuit driver, one of very few women who did back then. I don't know about these days, but back then. I very quickly saw and became involved in another side of life that was, and perhaps still is for me when I think back, extremely difficult to believe existed. And I was part of it. I also had to deal with the police officers who back then assessed that a psychology graduate and female, and quite reserved, if not very reserved, was an unknown quantity. So I was tested to the limit. In our driving course, for example, we spent 2 weeks, and apart from, we can't do it these days, apart from the things that we did around the countryside, at the International Raceway, you practice and practice to do a timed number of laps, turns, but whatever. And that had to be done in a specific time if you were to achieve your pursuit licence. Everybody, I was 2 out of 24. I was 2, the second only, there were 2 females and the rest men. And I was the last one to be asked to do my timing, and they said, no, you can go the other way. Anyway, I did, and I got it in the time they didn't think I'd get it in. So I thought, well, that's a lesson, and it certainly has followed me through other experiences I've had. So I achieved my goal working in the police force, and I got them in abundance. After 8 months as a uniformed patrol officer, I moved to the legal branch and later became an assistant police prosecutor. Another chapter of experiences was that. I was about to start law when in 1980 Robert and I decided to have a family. So I left the police force, actually in September of 1980. And as Don said, we have 2 children. Rebecca is now 32, a commercial pilot, married with twins, and our son Lachlan, 30. So it wasn't until I was 33 years of age that I started in the rag trade and headed for a business career, which I have found very exciting, yet frustrating, challenging, yet very rewarding, and with a lot of blood, sweat and tears has kept my passion alive. And why the clothing industry? People often ask, well, why the clothing industry? I had a love of corporate clothing, or of classic clothing, I should say, classic clothing, and my experience in the police force with my uniform. I believed passionately that there was a huge need to elevate the standard of clothes worn by women in the workplace. I myself had refused to wear, it was very different in those days, there was a different uniform, we didn't wear the men's uniform. I had a special tailor make a wool one rather than what they offered me, and so I knew there was something there I needed to fulfil. At the time the company was formed, Angus Clyne, basic zip-fronted, boring dresses were the norm in many offices and other workplaces. But when Angus Clyne began, then by the name Columbine, the design company, that's how it was first registered, it consisted of one pattern maker and cutter, did both things, 2 sewers and myself. A non-sewer who had the determination or vision to sell new age corporate wear to the world, career wear as they called it then. And no, I can hardly thread a needle, let alone use one when it's thread. My lack of technical skills, though, I believe, has been an asset to the company. I've never interfered with the skilled staff, and we always get the top people. As long as the end product and the quality was right and to the specifications that I would lay down. Design, vision, finance and marketing are my passion, along with the psychology that I use every day. Technicians are often not good business people, as I'm sure you know. The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber was one of the great books my husband Robert gave me to read. Rob, who for a time worked with me, was never touched by the passion of the rag trade, so always remained a rational advisor. Gerber makes a clear distinction between the technician, who's consumed by the business, and the entrepreneur, who steps outside and works on the business, and allows the technicians to be hands-on. With experience now, though, I would qualify that. I haven't written to him about it, but I will one day, by emphasising the importance of always keeping an eye on all functions of the organisation, particularly finance. And I think people who step too far out of their businesses can suffer when those things aren't kept an eye on. For some years, the company grew at an average rate, annual rate of 65%, which at times was like being in the middle of a whirlwind. This saw Angus Clyne, again as Todd said, listed in BRW's top 100 fastest growing private companies in Australia for 3 years in a row, 96, 97 and 98. One month, I remember in 1997, our turnover jumped from 180,000 a month to 310,000. And Robert and I sitting there thinking, what do we do now? But we did. We worked with, we had good resources, good ways of working through those issues, and together we achieved. We had to move premises a couple of times because of expansion, steadily took more staff on board as needed, and developed a great network of contractors who became more and more difficult to get in South Australia in the clothing industry, as such companies as Walter Christensen, a lot of companies were either closing down or went offshore. It was an exodus. And mentioning Walter Christensen, I thought people often ask me why the name Angus came, where the name Angus came from. Because I often get letters and things addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Angus Clyne. In fact, once someone told me it was a shame that Angus had the business and I was just the forefront person. So people do make up your minds for them, don't they? So many think it might be husband or father, but no, the day Walter Christensen was a wonderfully successful fashion company that unfortunately fell in 1993. As I picked up the phone to speak to Susan Angus, she was Walter Christensen's corporate manager. They had two divisions, fashion and corporate. Susan was on the line to me to see what could we do. The Angus family bought into the business, and our partnership was incredible. It was fantastic, very well timed, it was fruitful, but soon we went our separate ways. By December 1994, the two surnames, though, remained together. It's remained as Angus Clyne since. Partnerships where two strong-willed, determined women who wanted to be run their way don't go well. But that's life. In January 1995, Robert joined the company. He left the police force. I found out about that because I saw in a letter at home saying that he put in his resignation, and I asked him what he was going to do. And he fortunately said, we'll just work in the company for a while and see how it goes. And it was wonderful. Our first move into retailing was in 1995 when we opened our corporate centre at Goodwood, which we still have. To date, our corporate clothing label has outfitted staff from credit unions, hospitals, hotels, pharmacy chains, councils and government departments, legal, accounting and medical practices, and many others. Leonie Clyne Australia was a label launched in 1997, a move that was made to enhance Angus Clyne's image as a corporate clothing company. There's always been in our industry a very big division between the fashion side and the corporate side. To get a room full of fashion people is very difficult, and it's a very different beast. But we entered that world, and it was to align Angus Clyne with a fashion label, and it worked. It was a great success, but after 3 years and feeling consumed by the businesses, the two was a separate company, Rob asked the question, with Angus Clyne still growing, which it was still growing, how will we cope? And we also had at that time teenage children, and that was a big factor. He said to me, why don't we focus on our core business, on the core business, which was the corporate side, the corporate clothing. It was a very good business. His advice I took, and though it was a good experience, but we went back to corporate clothing. I began accepting board positions and later coached companies, in particular those that were experiencing growth, because we had done that, and growth is good, but it is a very difficult thing at times to keep under control. Working capital, new staff, it was not that easy. But so I coached a number of companies who were going from particularly 10 million upwards in their growth to see how they would cope with things such as cash flow. I learned a great deal from being involved in larger organisations outside of my own companies, and I've been on Flinders University Council for 11 years. For 7 of those, I chaired Flinders Consulting, which is the commercial arm of the university, the university's company, and that was really interesting. When Rob joined Angus Clyne, that was during a period of very rapid growth, and his participation was essential. I remember him saying to me, "Where are your order forms?" When I asked him to go and get something, I said, "Well, there's a piece of paper, that's the order form." He said, "But you must have." He couldn't believe how we had actually gone through things, I suppose, just running at a pace without that administration side to back us up. So it was essential because we were going to go to another stage. Rob had a significant influence on Angus Clyne, but of course we kept him well and truly out of the design area, the design department. With 18 and a half years in the police force in policy and administration, Rob used his administrative talents to turn the company into a procedural-driven, systems-controlled, manuals, quality, procedure, and helped us cope with the rapid growth. That was excellent. It was meetings, everything was documented, we had everything there. And from those company manuals, what we were then able to do was to develop training programs using those, and that was why in 1999 we were honoured with the Prime Minister's Small Business of the Year under John Howard. Now Rob will tell you, I don't know about this, Don, but will tell you that he achieved, that after he had achieved all that he needed to do, that I sacked him.
It's true.
I did it gently, and he did get a good payout. But not really, not true. Although, because at the time he had done so much, and we were finding it, he was being wasted. So the opportunity to work at as head of the Masonic Foundation came along, and Rob's been there for 12 years, and still does things with me when we need. I would like to reflect on the 25 years I've been in the clothing industry and the changes at Angus Clyne and how we have adapted. In 1988, the textile clothing and footwear industry employed more Australians than any other private sector. A large percentage of workers stayed at home and made garments made piece by piece. That's how they were paid. Because of the seasonal nature, or in the Angus Clyne case, project volume, this was the most appropriate way to either downsize or upscale when we needed work and where the demands were there. Because Angus Clyne sold directly to customers with no middleman, we were able to pay our contractors well, and it was part of the culture. Our manufacturing company, Cutting Edge Clothing Manufacturers, up until about 5 years ago, made garments for 250 South Australian schools. This was along with the production of our own corporate clothing and some fashion manufacturing. I did never deal directly with schools, but I was subcontracted. We still do for a few, but nothing like we used to. This changed in 2009 with the Textile Clothing, Footwear and Associated Industries Award. Angus Clyne was one of only two manufacturing companies in South Australia that actually signed a memorandum of understanding with the unions to see us through this process. The new legislation, for example, if we assigned work to our workers, I had to have an occupational health and safety audit on their homes, their whole homes, to be done before I could even get them to sew one garment. It was very expensive and very difficult. I had to supervise that they did not work after 7 in the evening or before 7 in the morning. Most of them, that's when they, particularly women, wanted to work. Pay sick leave, annual leave, do those things. And interesting, the greatest hurdle was that sewers had to be paid per hour rather than by piece, which meant that the slowest and the fastest sewers would be paid the same, and they didn't like it. Fastest guns, we call gun sewers, could earn $1,200 easily a week. And it went down to $700 under the hourly rate, and then I had to pay overtime. So that was not viable. We bought sewers in-house, and many fewer than we had had, and the company's business models had to change. As an example, Angus Clyne, when established in 88, we manufactured 100% of our own garments. Today, we sell about 20% Angus Clyne, but what we do is on-sell a lot of other garments. So the volume is there, we keep the same volume, but I don't have the manufacturing issues, which I'd still love to have, but there are some I can't I can't do it. Cutting edge, we get calls weekly from people all over Australia who say we're the only high-class manufacturers left. But I do help a few, but others it's just impossible. Focusing on niche markets and establishing a company culture of excellence in both product and services has been critical to the company's sustainability and, as I said, changing the business model as we go. It's been an interesting time, and now I qualify for what Rob tells me and Adelaideans say, that it takes 25 years to be an overnight success. So thank you.
Leonie, thank you on behalf of all the members of the club. We're out of time, so if you'd like to ask Leonie a question or two afterwards about how to be an overnight success in 25 years, pop up. I'm sure she'd like to help you. Leonie, it's been a great story, and thank you for telling us the story. And we congratulate you on the story and the journey, and we only wish you lots and lots of success in the future. We've run out of our extraordinary, fantastic biros that we usually give to people, and I'm now really happy to give you a little DVD which is celebrating 90 years of Rotary in South Australia, which we've prepared for our next celebration.